Hello, BookTube, and here's week two. It's late, and I do apologize for uh, uh, February fantasy stories. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, FFS, February fantasy stories. And this week two, dealt with uh, sword and sorcery fantasy. And I thought I'd read some Conan stories. I've never read the original stories, I don't believe. I read some of the ones that were interposed on, rewritten, and probably newer ones as well. And we're talking, 35, 40 plus years ago. So, and I remember them being okay, and I never really um, thought anything bad of them, but I just never continued reading them. So I thought this would be a good chance, and especially knowing that, there's been put out the original stories by Robert E. Howard. This is the coming of Conan the Cimmerian, original adventures of the greatest sword and sorcery hero of all time. It's illustrated. This is published by Del Rey through Bantam Books, and this came out in 2002, so it's been out for a while, 20 years. The paperback, I think, is first 2003. It's been into many editions. This looks like the 21st edition. And as I say, it's illustrated throughout. Not the best of illustrations, in my opinion, but so be it. And I read five of the stories. Um, I thought I'd see how far I could get, and I did manage through five of them. This is not going. This February fantasy is not going well with me. The first stuff I read from the Jeff and Anne and Jeff Vandermeer's collection of classic, and I just didn't really see them as fantasy. I suppose they are. It's made me think of them differently, but there was like sort of fairy tales, and I just don't like. I think I read in the wrong area there. But anyway, those were okay. But the Conan stories, I just find bloody boring. Extremely boring. And they're very superficial, and that's what they are. They're pure entertainment, which I understand. But people hacking around with swords and killing each other, I just don't find it interesting at all. Maybe when I was 10 years old, 12 years old, reading these, I probably would have liked them. But I just and I could see why, because there are things that are superficial like that I like. For instance, space opera from the 20s and 30s. I do like that stuff. I can find it fun to read, but it's not. It's they are, they're superficial generally at best, and some with a little more story to them. And yes, I've only read five, so that could be a difference, but they are written in order. I read the first one, and then I skipped to the. No, I read the first two, and then I skipped to. Uh, the Scarlet Citadel, which was the larger story. Uh, and yes, yeah, that was it. The Scarlet Citadel. And there were aspects that I thought were okay with that, but then they just sort of touched on them and then it went, And then the big thing is the battle and stuff, the fighting. But when he was chained up, and there was this serpent that was coming, sort of serpent from hell, and he's talking about all these. This is like underground caverns where this wizard's experiments with human, and I thought that was really interesting, and I wanted to know more about that. But it's just we just glossed over the surface of that and then gone. So, but I know I'm not the target for these stories. Uh, and but I can understand their popularity. Like, people want just superficial entertainment, which you got this in spades with this. but it's just, but the superficial things in there just don't interest me. I've never, well, maybe when I, like I say, when I was 10 or 12, the battle scenes might have done something for me, but I just don't, it doesn't thrill me. They bore me these days, and they've been boring me for decades, that kind of thing. Because they're unrealistic to begin with, 99% of the time. Uh, but and it's like, I know how this, well, not know how, but I suspect I can think why Conan has stood the test of time, because it was perfect for putting into comics, because there is no deep story to it, so it's very easy to do that, and also very very easy to take that veneer off a story and put it into a film and make that, or series or whatever. It's easy to do that for Hollywood to do that. They excel in just taking the veneer of a story, but that's all there is to this stuff, or at least the stuff that I read. There's not much more than the veneer. So they don't need to do that. They don't need to pull that off and just show that in the comic books or in the in the films, because that's all that's there. So they can get everything in for this stuff, and it's a little more difficult with ones that are layered stories. But as I say, I do hold my hands up that I've only read 5 out of these, and it's something that I struggled to get through the last 2, because but I wanted to make 5, um, just to give it a sample. And I probably will read a few more eventually, but slowly. Like, I'll just read a story here, read a story there. I just cannot take more than one story in a row anymore. It's just, they're just so, like I say, boring. I don't. I can understand how, because somebody will say some of the other stuff that are on par with it, like I say, not great literature in any shape or form, but just fun literature, and there's stuff that I enjoy that this person might not, but they like the Conan, so I can understand that they're on the same level. But as I say, I just want to say that it just doesn't, that level with the Conan stories and the sword and sorcery part. Like, the sorcery part just isn't enough in there so far. It's just sword, just unrealistic. But anyway, so that's week 2 for me for FFS, and um, week 3 is dark fantasy. We've got the book there, but it's down under a couple other books, so I don't have it out. But I've showed it before. It's dark fantasy edited. It's the edited by Mike Ashley for the British Library for their weird fiction, I think it is, or weird tales series. And I like Mike Ashley as an editor, so I'm hoping that there will be stuff in that book that I will like. I will again sample some of the stories, and then, but I know the last week, because I what I've picked for last week is Karnaki, the Ghost Hunter by Hodgson. That I know I like, because I've already read those, so those I'll enjoy. So at least if even dark fantasy is a washout for me, I know the final week I will enjoy the rereads for those, because they are rereads. So yeah, so that's where we're at, and do check out the other hosts for FFS, and I'll see you next time. Take care.